There is a specific kind of silence that hangs over the suburbs of Austin, Texas, at 6 in the morning. It's a humid, heavy silence, usually only broken by the distant hum of the highway or the rhythmic thwack of a sprinkler system coming to life. It's supposed to be peaceful. It's supposed to be the time of day when you can stand on your front porch, drink your overpriced hazelnut coffee, and pretend that you don't have a mortgage or a cholesterol problem. That was the plan, anyway. I stood there, barefoot on the cool concrete of my driveway, the ceramic mug warming my hands, and I stared at the love of my life. Her name was Lucille. She was a 1967 Chevrolet Impala Sport Coupe, and she was the reason I woke up in the morning. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean I literally woke up early just to look at her before the Texas sun got too high and turned the driveway into a griddle. Lucille wasn't just a car. She was a resurrection. When I bought her 4 years ago, she was a rust bucket shell sitting in a barn outside of Killeen, housing a family of possums and smelling like despair. I had spent every weekend, every holiday, and pretty much every spare dollar I had bringing her back from the dead. I had sanded her down to the bare metal until my fingerprints were gone. I had rebuilt the 327 small block engine on my kitchen table, much to the horror of my girlfriend at the time, who predictably became my ex-girlfriend shortly after the cylinder heads ruined a tablecloth. But it was worth it. Lucille was finished. She was painted a custom, deep ocean midnight blue, a multi-stage pearl coat that looked black in the shade but exploded into a galaxy of sapphire sparkles when the sun hit it. She was perfect. She was my Mona Lisa, and someone had spray-painted "Move It" in neon pink letters across her entire driver's side. My brain didn't process it at first. It refused. It was like looking at a dead body. Your mind just rejects the data because it's too trauma-inducing. I blinked. I took a sip of coffee. I blinked again. The letters were jagged, dripping, and aggressive. The M started on the rear quarter panel, slashed across the door, and the E finished on the front fender. The paint was thick. It had pooled on the chrome rocker panels, original vintage chrome that I had spent 6 months sourcing from a guy in Ohio, and dripped onto the driveway. The mug slipped from my hand. It hit the driveway with a dull, wet crunch, splashing hot hazelnut coffee all over my ankles. I didn't feel the burn. I didn't feel anything except a cold, white-hot rage that started at the base of my spine and shot up into my skull like a lightning bolt. I walked toward the car, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. I needed to see it up close. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was silly string. Maybe I was having a stroke and hallucinating. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the pink line of the O. It was tacky, wet, oil-based enamel, the cheap stuff, the kind that bites into the clear coat and bonds with it on a molecular level. You can't just wipe this off. You can't just buff this out. This wasn't vandalism. This was a death sentence for a $10,000 paint job. I smelled the fumes then. That sharp chemical rattle can smell. It was fresh. This had happened recently. I didn't need a detective. I didn't need to call CSI. I didn't need to dust for prints. I knew exactly who had done this. There was only one person in this zip code who hated this car enough to commit a felony before breakfast. Brenda. I turned slowly, pivoting on my heel like a tank turret, and looked across the street. 425 Maple Drive. The beige fortress. It was a house that looked exactly like mine, and exactly like every other house in the subdivision, but Brenda tried to make it look like a palace. Her lawn was cut to a uniform height of precisely 2 inches, measured with a ruler, I assumed. Her flower beds were military grade. There wasn't a weed in sight, likely because Brenda had yelled them into submission. Brenda was the president of the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association. She was a woman who had weaponized the concept of curb appeal. She was in her late 50s, with a haircut that looked like a jagged helmet and a resting face that suggested she was constantly smelling something slightly rotten. For the last 6 months, Brenda had been on a crusade against Lucille. It started the week I brought the car home from the paint shop. I have a 2-car garage, but it's full. It's not full of junk. It's full of tools, an engine hoist, a welding rig, and my daily driver truck. So Lucille lived in the driveway. I had a high-quality, weatherproof cover for her, but I liked to leave it off on the weekends so I could admire her. That was my crime. Existing. The first letter came 3 days after I parked her there. Dear resident, it has come to the attention of the HOA board that you are parking a derelict vehicle in your driveway. Section 4.2 of the Community Guidelines prohibits the storage of non-functioning or unsightly vehicles in plain view. Please remove this eyesore immediately or face fines. The board. I had marched over to her house that day, polite but firm. Brenda, I'd said, it's not derelict. It runs perfectly. It's a restored classic. It's worth more than your Honda. It looks like gang activity, she had said, clutching her pearls. It's loud. It smells like gas. And that color, it's aggressive. It doesn't fit the earth tone aesthetic of the neighborhood. It's blue, Brenda. It's a car. It's a blight, she had sniffed. Move it, or I will fine you until you go bankrupt. We had gone back and forth for months. She sent fines for oil stains that didn't exist. She sent fines because the car cast a shadow on her mailbox. I'm not kidding. She called the city code enforcement, who came out, saw the car, high-fived me, and left. She called the police twice to report a noise disturbance when I was tuning the carburetor at 2:00 p.m. on a Saturday. And now, this. I looked back at the car. Move it! She had literally written her demand on the vehicle. It was so brazen, so incredibly stupid, that I almost respected the audacity. Almost. I checked my watch. 6:10 a.m. I didn't care. I marched across the street. I didn't walk. I stormed. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins, making my vision sharp and high contrast. I stepped onto her driveway, her precious, power-washed driveway, and up to her front door. I didn't ring the doorbell. I pounded on the wood with the meat of my fist. Thud, thud, thud. Brenda, open the door! I waited. Silence. Thud, thud, thud. I know you're in there, Brenda. I know you're awake. A light flickered on in the hallway. I heard the chain rattle. The door cracked open about 3 inches, and there she was. One eye visible, glaring at me through the gap. Do you have any idea what time it is? She hissed. Her voice sounded like tires screeching on dry pavement. I should call the police for harassment. You are disturbing the peace. Open the door, Brenda, I said. My voice was dangerously calm. It was the calm of a man who is deciding whether to commit murder or file a lawsuit. I will do no such thing. Go away, you lunatic. Look at my driveway, I said, pointing behind me without turning my head. Look at it. She hesitated. Then curiosity got the better of her. She opened the door a little wider and peered past me. I saw her eyes land on the Impala. I saw the recognition. And then I saw the smirk. It was a tiny thing, a twitch of the corner of her mouth, a flash of satisfaction in her beady little eyes. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look confused. She looked proud. My goodness, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Looks like someone finally got tired of looking at that. Trash heap. I told you, Jack. I told you the neighborhood wouldn't stand for it. People take pride in their homes here. You did it, I said. She laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. Me? Don't be ridiculous. I am the president of the HOA. I uphold the law. I don't break it. You spray-painted my car, Brenda. It's pink. It's the same pink as those hideous flamingos you put in your backyard for your granddaughter's birthday last week. Pink is a very common color, she said, crossing her arms over her floral bathrobe. And honestly, it's an improvement. At least now it matches the tacky vibe you bring to this street. Maybe you should take the hint, Jack. Whoever did that? They were just doing what we were all thinking. They were performing a public service. So you're admitting you're glad it happened? I'm saying you deserved it, she snapped, her mask slipping. She stepped out onto the porch, getting in my face. She smelled like stale coffee and entitlement. You think you can just do whatever you want because you're some mechanic? You think the rules don't apply to you? I have sent you warnings. I have sent you fines. You ignored me. You disrespected my authority. Your authority? I laughed. You run a homeowners association, Brenda. You're not the Supreme Court. I am the law in this neighborhood, she screeched, her face turning a blotchy red. And that car is gone. If you don't move it to the junkyard today, I'll have the city tow it as an abandoned vehicle. And now that it's vandalized? Oh, it's definitely a code violation. Broken windows, graffiti, that's an immediate tow order. It doesn't have broken windows, I said. Give it time, she smiled. A cruel, reptilian smile. Bad things happen to bad neighbors, Jack. I stared at her. I memorized her face. I memorized the smug tilt of her chin, the way she clutched her robe, the absolute certainty she had that she was untouchable. She thought she had won. She thought I was just some helpless guy with a ruined car who would cry and move away. She had no idea who she was dealing with. You're right, Brenda, I said softly. She blinked, surprised by my sudden capitulation. I am? Yeah. Bad things do happen to bad neighbors. I turned around and walked away. That's right. Walk away, she yelled after me. And get that piece of junk off my street before I call the tow truck myself. I didn't look back. I walked back across the asphalt, avoiding the puddle of spilled coffee and the pink drips on the concrete. I walked past Lucille, forcing myself not to look at the damage again. It hurt too much. I went inside my house. I locked the door. I leaned my back against it and took a deep breath, counting to 10. 1, 2, 3. I needed to be smart that... Brenda was right about one thing. Without proof, it was just my word against hers. And she was a little old lady, well, middle-aged tyrant, with connections, and I was a single guy with a loud car. The cops would write it off as a civil dispute. They'd say, "Sorry about your car, file an insurance claim," and leave. 4, 5, 6. But Brenda had forgotten something. Or maybe she just didn't care. She was so used to bullying people into submission that she forgot that technology existed. She forgot that we live in the 21st century. 7, 8, 9. I pushed off the door and walked into my office. I sat down at my desk and woke up my computer. My 3 monitors flickered to life. I clicked on the folder labeled Security. 3 days ago, after she had threatened to poison my dog, a bluff, I hoped, since I don't have a dog, but the sentiment was there, I had installed a Ring Spotlight Cam Pro. I didn't mount it by the front door where it would be obvious. I mounted it high up on the soffit of the 2nd story, tucked behind the gutter, pointed directly at the driveway. I pulled up the timeline. I scrolled back. 5 o'clock a.m. Nothing. Just the wind blowing. The trees. 5:30 a.m. Nothing. 5:42 a.m. Motion detected. I clicked play. The video was beautiful. 1080p HD. Night vision so crisp you could count the pebbles on the driveway. On the screen, the street was empty. Then, from the top left corner, a figure emerged. She wasn't wearing a ninja suit. She wasn't wearing a mask. She was wearing that same floral bathrobe she was wearing right now. Brenda walked across the street. She didn't even look around. She walked with purpose. In her right hand, she held a can. I leaned in, watching the screen. She walked right up to Lucille. She stood there for a second, looking at the car. Then she shook the can. Chick, 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 chick. The sound was faint but audible through the camera microphone. She raised her arm. She started spraying. I watched her carve the M. I watched her carve the O. She took her time. She was enjoying it. She finished the E, stepped back to admire her work, and then moved to the fender for the IT. Then, and this was the moment that was going to pay for my retirement, she looked up. She looked directly at my house. She looked right at the front door, and she laughed. She tossed the empty spray can into my azalea bushes, wiped her hands on her robe, and turned around to walk back home. I paused the video on the frame where she tossed the can. Her face was illuminated by the street lamp. It was perfect. It was undeniable. I sat back in my chair. A low, dark chuckle bubbled up from my chest. "Gotcha," I whispered. I didn't just have her for vandalism. I had her for criminal mischief. In Texas, the degree of the crime depends on the cost of the damage. I did a quick mental calculation. To strip and repaint a custom pearl coat on a vintage car, you can't just paint the door. The color won't match. You have to paint the whole side. Maybe the whole car to get the blend right. Labor, materials, chrome replacement, because she sprayed the trim. We were looking at $15,000 minimum. Anything over $10,500 is a state jail felony. Brenda hadn't just played a prank. She had committed a felony that carried a sentence of 180 days to 2 years in a state jail facility. I picked up my phone. I didn't dial the non-emergency line. I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? I'd like to report a crime in progress, I said, my voice steady. My neighbor is currently harassing me, and I have video evidence of her causing approximately $20,000 in damage to my property. Is the person still there, sir? Oh, she's there, I said, looking out the window at Brenda, who was now out on her lawn, watering her petunias as if nothing had happened. She's right across the street. Officers are on the way. I hung up the phone. I looked at the video clip one more time. I saved it to my hard drive. I saved it to my Google Drive. I emailed it to my work account. I texted it to my brother. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. I walked back out to the driveway to wait for the show. Brenda saw me come out. She glared at me over the hose nozzle. She shouted something about deed restrictions. But I didn't answer. I just leaned against the garage door, folded my arms, and stared at the entrance of the subdivision. 10 minutes later, the first cruiser turned the corner. It wasn't rushing. No sirens. Just a slow, predatory roll. It was a Dodge Charger, black and white, the distinct, aggressive silhouette of American law enforcement. Brenda stopped watering her flowers. She looked at the cop car. She smiled. She actually smiled. She thought they were here for me. She thought she had summoned them with her psychic HOA powers. The cruiser rolled past her house. It rolled past the stop sign. It pulled slowly into my driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel I'd swept off the concrete yesterday. The door opened, and a mountain of a man stepped out. He was at least 6'4", with a buzz cut and sunglasses that hid his eyes but couldn't hide the frown forming on his face. He adjusted his belt, the leather creaking, and walked toward me. But he didn't look at me. He stopped about 5 feet away from the Impala. He took off his sunglasses. He looked at the deep, midnight blue paint. He looked at the chrome. And then he looked at the neon pink Move It. A physical wince rippled through his body. It was the universal reaction of a car guy seeing a tragedy. "That's a 67, the officer said. His voice was deep, like gravel tumbling in a dryer. "Yes, sir," I said. "Sport coupe, 327 V8, turbo fire. Original engine? Matching numbers. Rebuilt it myself." The officer shook his head slowly. He looked like he was in physical pain. He reached out a hand toward the fender, hovered it over the pink paint, and pulled it back. "Please tell me that's vinyl wrap. Please tell me that peels off." "Oil-based enamel," I said. "Rust-Oleum, I think." She shook the can really hard. The officer turned to look at me properly for the first time. His name tag read, Miller. "She?" I nodded toward the street. "My neighbor, Brenda, the one staring at us right now." Miller turned. Brenda was standing at the edge of her lawn, the hose still running onto her driveway, creating a puddle. She looked confused. She was waiting for him to arrest me. "She did this?" Miller asked. "This morning, about 40 minutes ago. You see her do it?" "Better?" I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "I have it in 4K. Miller took my phone. I hit play. We stood there in silence as the video played. Miller watched Brenda march across the street. He watched her spray the car. He watched her laugh. He watched her toss the can. "Can is in the azaleas," I said quietly. "I haven't touched it." Miller handed the phone back to me. His face had hardened. The car guy sorrow was gone, replaced by cop coldness. "That's a lot of damage," Miller said. "Paint like this. What are we, talking? 10 grand? 15, I said. "Easily." Miller nodded. "That's a felony, state jail felony, criminal mischief." "I'd like to press charges, Officer Miller. I'd like to press them all the way to the wall." Miller adjusted his belt again. He looked at the car one last time, shook his head, and then looked across the street at Brenda. "Wait here," he said. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, show me at 424 Maple. I'm gonna need a second unit for transport. 1 female in custody." I watched as Officer Miller began the long walk across the street. Brenda dropped the hose. The water sprayed wildly onto her shoes, but she didn't move. She just stared as the giant officer marched up her driveway. The fun was just beginning. The walk across the street was slow, deliberate. Officer Miller moved with the terrifying calmness of a glacier that had decided to crush a specific pebble. I stayed by the Impala, leaning against the rear fender, my arms crossed. It was like watching a nature documentary where the lion finally spots the gazelle that's been mocking it for 3 seasons. Brenda stood her ground on the porch. She had abandoned the hose, which was now snaking around her lawn like a dying reptile, soaking her pristine driveway. She smoothed her floral bathrobe, lifted her chin, and put on her "I would like to speak to the manager" face. It was a look that had terrorized retail workers and waitstaff for decades. But Officer Miller wasn't a barista who got her order wrong. "Good morning, ma'am," Miller said as he reached the bottom of her porch steps. His voice carried clearly in the morning stillness. "Officer?" Brenda clipped, her tone icy. "I assume you're here to finally do something about that, thing across the street? I've been calling the non-emergency line about the noise violations for months. It's about time someone took the property values of this neighborhood seriously." Miller didn't take the bait. He didn't even blink. He just rested his hand on his belt, near the cuffs. "Ma'am, I'm not here about the vehicle. I'm here about the incident that occurred at approximately 5:45 a.m. this morning." "Incident?" Brenda scoffed. She actually rolled her eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been asleep. I just woke up." "We have video, ma'am," Miller said. He didn't shout. He didn't use a gotcha tone. He just stated it like a fact of physics. Gravity exists. The sky is blue. We have video. Brenda froze. The confidence didn't leave her face, but it cracked. A tiny fissure of panic appeared in her eyes. "Video? That's impossible. That's illegal. He can't film me. That's an invasion of my privacy. I did not sign a release form." "He filmed a public street and his own driveway from his own property," Miller said. "It's perfectly legal, and the video clearly shows you spray painting the vehicle across the street." "It's a deep fake," Brenda shrieked. The Samoset's volume was suddenly at an 11. "He's a computer person. He doctored it. I am an upstanding member of this community. I am the president of the HOA. My husband Ted plays golf with the chief of police. Do you know who I am?" "I know who you are, ma'am," Miller said, taking a step up onto the porch. "You're a suspect in a felony criminal mischief case. Now, I'm going to ask you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a worldview shattering. Brenda had lived her entire life under the assumption that the rules protected her and punished people like me. The idea that the handcuffs were for her simply did not compute. "No," she said. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult." "I said no!" Brenda screamed. She took a step back and tried to slam the front door in Miller's face. It was a bad move. Miller's boot was in the jamb before the wood could make contact. He pushed the door back open with effortless strength. Brenda stumbled back into her foyer, tripping over a rug. "Brenda, check," I whispered to myself from across the street. "Turn around," Miller barked. His patience officially expired. He spun her around. Brenda let out a sound that was half shriek, half siren. "Help! Police brutality! He's hurting me! Ted! Teed!" The neighborhood was awake now. Mr. Henderson, 2 doors down, had come out onto his porch in his plaid pajamas. He was holding a bowl of cereal. He stopped eating, the spoon hovering halfway to his mouth, watching the scene unfold with the rapt attention of a man watching the Super Bowl. Mrs. Gable was peeking through her blinds. A jogger had stopped in the middle of the street, taking out his phone to record. Ted appeared in the doorway behind Brenda. Ted was a small, beige man. He looked like he had been slowly eroded by the wind over the last 30 years. He was wearing a robe that was too big for him. "Brenda," Ted asked, blinking, "what's happening?" "Do something!" Brenda screamed as Miller clicked the first cuff onto her wrist. "Call the lawyer! Call the mayor! Tell them who I am!" Ted looked at Miller. Then he looked at Brenda, who was currently trying to kick the officer in the shin. Then he looked across the street at me. Our eyes met. I gave him a small nod. Ted didn't nod back. But he didn't rush to help her either. He just sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to deflate his entire body. I'll go find the number for the lawyer, Brenda," he said softly. He turned around and walked back into the kitchen, leaving his wife to be manhandled by the law. "You're hurting my shoulder! I have a condition!" Brenda yelled, as Miller secured the second cuff. You should have thought about that before you vandalized a car, ma'am, Miller said. He guided her out the door. This was the walk of shame to end all walks of shame. Brenda, the queen of Whispering Oaks, the woman who measured grass height. With a ruler, the woman who once fined a family because their chalk drawings on the sidewalk were too abstract, was being marched down her own driveway in handcuffs and a bathrobe. She saw me. She stopped fighting for a second. Her eyes locked onto mine. If looks could kill, I would have combusted on the spot. "You!" she screamed, lunging forward, dragging Miller a step with her. "You did this! You think this is funny? You think you've won? I will sue you into the ground. I will take your house. I will take that stupid car and have it crushed into a cube. Do you hear me, Jack? I will ruin you." "Brenda," I called out, cupping my hands around my mouth. "You missed a spot on the fender." "I'll kill you!" Miller shoved her into the back of the Charger. He had to push her head down to keep her from banging it on the frame, a courtesy she definitely didn't deserve. He slammed the door. The muffled screaming continued from inside the glass. The second cruiser arrived then, Officer Davis stepping out. She looked at the scene, the screaming woman in the back of Miller's car, the pink Impala, the neighbors watching with popcorn-eating energy, and shook her head. Miller walked back over to me. He looked tired. "All right, Mr. Reynolds," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "She's in custody. We're charging her with criminal mischief, resisting arrest, and, hell, I might throw in disorderly conduct for the ear damage she just gave me." "Thank you, officer. Seriously." Miller looked at the Impala again. "Don't thank me yet. You got a long road ahead fixing this. You need to get those estimates. High ones. The DA needs to see a number that makes their eyes water. If it's under 2,500, she might wiggle out with a misdemeanor. We need to hit that felony threshold hard." "Oh, it'll be over 2,500, I promised. I'm taking it to Exotic Auto Spa." Miller whistled. "Those guys? Yeah, that'll do it. Get the statement to the station by noon. Drive safe." Miller got back in his car. He didn't turn on the sirens, but he did flash the lights as he pulled away, carrying the screaming cargo of Brenda down the street and out of my life, at least for a few hours. Mr. Henderson walked over from his yard, still holding his cereal bowl. He stood next to me, looking at the pink graffiti. "Did she really do it?" Henderson asked. "Caught her in 4K, I said. Henderson nodded slowly. He took a bite of his cereal. "You know, she fined me $50 last week because my trash can lid was open 2 inches. 2 inches, Jack. She's going to jail, Henderson." Henderson smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just seen a tyrant toppled. Best morning ever. Once the adrenaline faded, the reality set in. I had to drive Lucille. I couldn't leave her in the driveway with "Move It" scrawled on the side. I had to get her to the shop. But driving a car that looks like it's been tagged by a vengeful teenager is a humbling experience. I pulled the cover off my seats, started the engine. The 327 roared to life with that deep, throaty rumble that usually made me grin, but today just made me sad, and backed out. The drive to Exotic Auto Spa was only 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every stoplight was a torture session. People stared. A guy in a Mustang pulled up next to me, gave me a thumbs up for the car, then saw the pink paint, and his face dropped. He rolled down his window. "Crazy X?" he yelled over the idol. "Crazy neighbor," I yelled back. "That sucks, man. Beautiful ride, though." I pulled into the lot of Exotic Auto Spa. This wasn't a Collision King or a Mako. This was a place where the floor was polished concrete, and the air smelled like expensive wax and ozone. There were 2 Ferraris in the bay, and a 1969 Camaro that looked like it had been dipped in liquid glass. Rico, the owner, was standing by the bay door. He knew me. He knew Lucille. He had painted her 3 years ago. When he saw the pink, he didn't say anything. He just closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. I parked and got out. "Don't say it," I said. "Jack," Rico sighed, walking over and inspecting the damage. "Why? Why?" "Neighbor dispute. She used Rust-Oleum." Rico hissed through his teeth. He ran a finger near the paint, but didn't touch it. "Enamel. And it's been baking in the sun for 4 hours? It's bit in, Jack. It's bit deep." "Can you buff it?" Rico looked at me like I had asked if he could perform surgery with a spoon. "Buff it? On this pearl? Jack, if I try to solvent this off, I'm gonna burn the clear. If I wet sand it, I'm gonna go through the pearl layer. And look here." He pointed to the door handle and the chrome trim. "She sprayed the bright work. The solvents in that spray paint etch chrome. That's ruined." "So what's the fix?" "Strip it," Rico said, shaking his head. "I gotta strip the door, the fender, and the quarter panel. But here's the problem. This color, midnight sapphire pearl, I mixed this custom. Even if I mix it perfectly again, the pearl flake lays down differently depending on humidity, air pressure, the spray gun angle. If I just paint the side, you'll see the difference when the sun hits it. It'll look like a patchwork quilt." So, to do it right? To make it show quality again? I gotta respray the whole car. Hood, roof, trunk, everything. Blend it all in. "Give me the number, Rico," I said. "And don't do me any favors. Don't give me the buddy price. I need the real price. The insurance company and her lawyers need to see the real price." Rico walked into his office. I heard typing. A printer whirred. He came back out with a sheet of paper. He handed it to me. Parts and labor estimate. Strip and prep, chemical dip media blast affected panels. $3,200. Body work and block sanding. $2,500. Chrome trim replacement. Vintage OEM. $1,800. Paint materials. PPG custom pearl, clear. $3,500. Paint labor, refinish, complete exterior. $5,000. Cut and buff, show finish. $1,200. Hazardous waste disposal. $250. Total, $17,450. I looked at the number. It was staggering. It was more than most people's daily drivers were worth. "It's perfect," I said. "When can you start?" "Leave it," Rico said. "I'm not letting you drive that monstrosity back home. I'll pull it in now. We'll get the pink off today just to stop the chemical reaction, but the paint job is going to take 6 weeks. Take your time, Rico. Just make her beautiful again." I took an Uber home. The receipt for the estimate was burning a hole in my pocket. $17,450. That was a Class A misdemeanor? No way. That was a state jail felony. In Texas, the threshold for a state jail felony is $2,500 to $30,000. We were comfortably in the go-to-jail bracket. Brenda was in holding for 12 hours. I found this out because I have a friend who works dispatch for the county. Apparently, Brenda was a nightmare. She demanded vegan meals. She demanded a pillow. She demanded to speak to the police commissioner. She told the booking officer that her cuffs were too tight 6 times. But money talks, and Ted, poor beleaguered Ted, finally managed to liquidate enough assets or call enough favors to post her bail. She came home at 8:00 p.m. I was sitting on my front porch in the dark, drinking a beer. I wanted to see it. Ted's Lexus pulled into the driveway. Brenda got out. She looked diminished. The floral robe was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes she had been arrested in. Her hair, usually a helmet of hairspray, was flat on one side where she had probably tried to sleep on a concrete bench. She walked up her driveway. She didn't look across the street. She kept her head down. But I knew she knew I was there. The next morning, the restraining order was served. It was a standard protective order, but because we were neighbors, it had specific clauses. She could not communicate with me. She could not step foot on my property. And, crucially, she had to maintain a distance of 500 feet from my person, wherever possible. The wherever possible was the kicker. Since our front doors were only about 80 feet apart, it meant that if I was outside in my front yard, she effectively couldn't be in hers. Saturday morning, 2 days after the arrest, I decided to test the waters. I went out to mow my lawn. I didn't need to mow it. It was fine. But I wanted to be outside. I saw Brenda's front door open. She stepped out, wearing big sunglasses and a hat, carrying her purse. She was heading to her car. I stopped the mower. I stood right at the edge of my curb. She froze. She looked at me. She looked at the distance between us. It was maybe 40 feet. She knew the terms. If she violated the order while out on bond, her bail would be revoked, and she'd go straight back to the lockup until trial. She stood there, hand onto her car door handle, vibrating with rage. I gave her a little wave. Just a tiny finger lift. She slammed the car door shut, turned around, and marched back into her house. I restarted the mower. The grass had never looked greener. The legal machine grinds slow, but it grinds fine. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the office of Saul Zimmerman. Saul was a lawyer who specialized in civil litigation and property law. He looked like a badger who had learned to wear a suit. He was short, aggressive, and had a reputation for making grown men cry in depositions. "So," Saul said, looking at the police report and the estimate from Rico. "Let me get this straight. She admits to it on video?" "Yes." "She's the HOA president?" "Yes." "And the damages are 17 grand?" "Yes." Saul leaned back in his chair and tented his fingers. "Jack, this isn't a lawsuit. This is a piñata. We're going to hit it until candy comes out." "I don't just want the repair money, Saul," I said. "Want her to hurt? She tried to bully me out of my own home. She tried to devalue my property. She humiliated me." "We'll sue for everything," Saul said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. "Property damage. Loss of use, because you can't drive the car for 6 weeks, right? We'll charge her for a rental of a comparable vehicle. You can't rent a 67 Impala, so we'll bill her for a luxury exotic rental rate. Let's say $300 a day." "I like that." "Emotional distress," Saul continued, scribbling. "Diminished value. Even after Rico fixes it, the car has a vandalism flag on its history now. Collectors hate that. That's a 10% loss in total value. The car is worth what? 80 grand? Appraised at 85. So that's another 8 grand right there. Legal fees, court costs." Saul did some math. "We're going to hit her with a civil suit for about $50,000, plus punitive damages." "Can she pay it?" I asked. Saul paused. He tapped his pen on the desk. "That's the question. I ran a preliminary asset check. The house is in her name and Ted's. It's got equity, but they refinanced 2 years ago. Ted's business, he ran a pool supply company, went belly up last year. They're leveraging credit to maintain the lifestyle. Brenda is what we call suburban solvent. She looks rich, but if you shake her upside down, only moths fall out. So if we win and she can't write the check," Saul grinned, showing a lot of teeth. "We put a lien on the house, and that, my friend, is where the fun really starts." "Do it," I said. "File it." The criminal trial was scheduled for 3 months out. The civil suit would follow. Brenda was fighting on 2 fronts. She had a criminal defense attorney trying to keep her out of jail, and she would soon have to hire a civil defense attorney to keep me from taking her retirement fund. And in the meantime, Lucille sat in the shop, stripped down to bare metal, waiting to be reborn. And I sat on my porch, watching the beige fortress across the street, waiting for the cracks to show. It didn't take long. 3 weeks later, a "for sale" sign appeared on the lawn of the house next to Brenda. The neighbors were getting out. The gossip was toxic. Everyone knew. Brenda wasn't the HOA queen anymore. She was the neighborhood pariah. But Brenda wouldn't move. She was too proud. She was going to go down with the ship. I was counting on it. Autumn in Austin is less of a season and more of a slightly less aggressive summer. The humidity drops, the leaves turn a crispy shade of brown, and the high school football stadium lights start buzzing on Friday nights. 3 months had passed since the Great Pink incident. Lucille was still in the hospital. I visited her once a week at Exotic Auto Spa. She looked like a skeleton. Rico had stripped her down to the bare metal. The pink was gone, but so was the blue. She was a gray steel ghost sitting on jack stands. Seeing her like that, vulnerable and unfinished, kept my anger simmering at a steady, low boil. Across the street, things had gotten weird. Brenda was technically out on bail, awaiting trial. The restraining order was still in effect, which meant our interactions were limited to a bizarre form of interpretative dance. If I walked out to get my mail, and she was already at her mailbox, she had to scurry back inside like a startled cockroach. If I was washing my truck in the driveway, she couldn't come out to water her hydrangeas. She tried to maintain her grip on the neighborhood, but her power was slipping. The "for sale" sign next door had sold, and the new neighbors, a young couple with a very loud golden retriever, didn't know Brenda's history, and they didn't care about her rules. I saw the dog pee on Brenda's prize-winning petunias once. I almost went over and shook the dog's paw, but Brenda walked with her head high. She was convinced, absolutely convinced, that the court system would vindicate her. She told anyone who would listen, mostly the mailman who couldn't escape, that it was all a misunderstanding and that I was extorting her. Then, the trial date arrived. Criminal court is not like TV. It's mostly waiting on hard wooden benches, smelling floor wax and despair. But because this was a felony case with significant property damage, we were in the big leagues. I sat in the back row. Officer Miller was there, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform. Brenda sat at the defense table next to her court-appointed attorney. She apparently hadn't wanted to pay for a private criminal lawyer, saving her money for the inevitable countersuit. Her lawyer looked exhausted. He was a young guy with messy hair who clearly had a caseload of 200 files and just wanted to go home. The DA, on the other hand, was ready. The estimate from Rico, $17,450, had done exactly what Miller said it would. It had pissed the district attorney off. The proceedings began. State of Texas versus Brenda Holloway. Charge, criminal mischief, first-degree felony. Brenda stood up. She was wearing a beige suit that matched her house. She looked ready to demand to speak to the judge's manager. The trial was surprisingly short, mostly because the evidence was devastating. The DA played the video. The courtroom watched Brenda shake the can. The courtroom watched Brenda spray the car. The courtroom watched Brenda laugh. You could feel the air in the room change. It went from boring procedural to, wow, she's actually evil. Then, Brenda insisted on taking the stand. Her lawyer whispered furiously to her, shaking his head. "Don't do it. Shut up. Sit down." But Brenda brushed him off. She marched to the witness stand, swore on the Bible, and sat down. "Mrs. Holloway," the DA asked, "did you spray paint the vehicle in question?" "I did," Brenda said, chin raised. A murmur went through the court. "And why did you do that?" "Because," Brenda said, turning to address the judge directly, "I have a responsibility to my community. That vehicle was a violation of our aesthetic standards. It was an eyesore. I had exhausted all administrative options. I was simply enforcing the standards of the neighborhood. It was an act of civil improvement." The judge, a stern man with glasses named Judge Patterson, slowly lowered his pen. He looked at Brenda over the rim of his spectacles. "Mrs. Holloway," Judge Patterson said, his voice deep and resonant, "are you admitting that you intentionally destroyed $17,000 of property because you didn't like the color?" "It wasn't just the color," Brenda argued. "It was the principle, and the paint would have washed off if he hadn't let it sit there. He's trying to gouge me." "Ma'am," the judge said, "that was oil-based enamel on a custom finish. You might as well have taken a sledgehammer to it." "Well, I shouldn't be treated like a criminal for caring." "About my property values." "You are a criminal," Judge Patterson said, "because you committed a crime." The verdict took the jury 20 minutes. Guilty. Sentencing was immediate. "Brenda Holloway," the judge said, "I am sentencing you to 2 years of probation. You are to perform 200 hours of community service, and I am specifically assigning you to the graffiti abatement program. You're going to spend your weekends scrubbing spray paint off highway underpasses. Maybe that will teach you the irony of your actions." Brenda gasped. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $17,450 to Mr. Reynolds. This is to be paid within 30 days. Failure to pay will result in a revocation of your probation and immediate incarceration." Brenda stood there, stunned. The gavel banged. She walked out of the courtroom, not looking at me. She looked like she had been slapped with a wet fish. I felt good. Justice had been served. But I should have known better. Brenda didn't operate in reality. 30 days came and went. I checked my mailbox every day. I checked my informed delivery app. I checked under the doormat. No check. The 31st day arrived. I called the probation office. "Yeah, she hasn't paid," the probation officer told me on the phone. "She filed a motion claiming financial hardship. She says she doesn't have the liquidity." "So she goes to jail?" I asked, hopeful. "Not yet. The court usually gives a grace period to set up a payment plan. She's offering $50 a month." I did the math. 50 a month. It would take her 29 years to pay off the repair bill. I'd be in a nursing home, and Lucille would be rusted out again by the time she finished paying for the paint job. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." I hung up and called Saul. "Saul, she stiffed me." "Of course she did," Saul said. I could hear him smiling through the phone. "She's leveraging the system. She thinks because she's a nice old lady with a house in the suburbs, they won't throw her in jail for debt, and honestly, she's probably right. The criminal courts hate turning into debt collectors." "So what do we do?" "Now," Saul said, "we go to civil court. We take the gloves off. We don't just ask for the repairs. We ask for the whole menu." The civil suit was a different beast. In criminal court, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. We had already cleared that bar. Brenda was a convicted felon. That meant in civil court, where the burden is just preponderance of the evidence, Basically, is it 51% likely she did it? We had a slam dunk. It's called res judicata. The fact was already established. She couldn't argue she didn't do it. We filed suit in the district court. Jack Reynolds versus Brenda Halloway. Causes of action. Trespass to chattels. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Diminished value of property. Loss of use. We served her the papers on a Tuesday. I watched from my living room window as the process server handed her the thick envelope. She threw it on the ground. The process server shrugged, pointed at it, and walked away. That counts as service in Texas. Brenda didn't hire a lawyer this time either. She showed up to the deposition pro se, representing herself. I sat next to Saul in the conference room. Brenda sat opposite us. She looked tired. Her roots were showing, gray streaks in the dyed blonde hair. "This is harassment," Brenda said, slamming her hand on the mahogany table. "I have already been sentenced. You can't sue me for the same thing twice. That's double jeopardy." Saul adjusted his cufflinks. He looked at her with the pity one might feel for a bug about to hit a windshield. "Mrs. Halloway," Saul said smoothly, "double jeopardy applies to criminal charges. This is civil liability. You broke his car. You owe him for the car, and the stress, and the fact that his classic vehicle now has a permanent blemish on its history. Report." "I don't have any money," Brenda shouted. "Ted's business failed. We have credit card debt. We are barely making the mortgage. You can't get blood from a stone." "We'll see," Saul said. The civil judgment came down 4 weeks later. The judge granted us everything. Repair costs, $17,450. The original restitution, now enforceable as a civil debt. Diminished value, $8,500. Expert testimony from Rico proved the car lost value. Loss of use, $5,400. 45 days at $120 day for a rental. Emotional distress, $5,000, because Brenda was malicious. Legal fees, $12,000. Texas law allows recovery of attorney fees for property damage claims. Total judgment, $48,350. With interest, we were looking at $50,000. "Okay," I said to Saul as we walked out of the courthouse. "Great piece of paper, frame-worthy. But she just said she's broke. How do we collect?" Saul stopped on the courthouse steps. He pulled a cigar out of his pocket. He didn't light it, just held it. "She says she's broke," Saul said. "But she owns a house, a nice house, in a nice neighborhood." "Homestead exemption," I said. "I know Texas law. You can't force someone to sell their primary residence to pay a judgment." "True," Saul said. "Texas has very strong homestead protections. We can't force a sale to pay a general judgment creditor. However," he paused for dramatic effect, "we can file an abstract of judgment. We record it with the county clerk. It attaches a lien to all her real property. It sits there like a landmine. She can't sell the house without paying us. She can't refinance the house without paying us." "So we wait?" I asked, disappointed. "I have to wait until she moves?" "Usually, yes," Saul grinned. "But remember what she screamed in the deposition? We are barely making the mortgage. If she is on the edge, Jack, this lien is going to push her over." "How?" "Because most mortgage contracts have a clause. It says the borrower must keep the property free of other liens. When we file this, the bank gets notified. It dings her credit score. Hard. If she's on an adjustable rate, or if she was trying to refinance to lower her payments to survive. We just killed that option. We are the sand in the gears." "File it," I said. We filed the lien. The reaction was delayed, but explosive. 2 weeks later, I was in my garage, organizing my tools. The garage door was open. I heard shouting. I walked out. Ted and Brenda were in their driveway. They were arguing, loudly. This was new. Ted never argued. Ted was a doormat. But today the doormat was fighting back. "They denied it, Brenda!" Ted was yelling, waving a letter. "They denied the refinance because of the judgment. The bank said our debt-to-income ratio is shot and the lien makes us toxic." "Lower your voice," Brenda hissed, looking frantically at my house. "I won't lower my voice. We can't make the payment this month. We're 3 months behind already. I told you to pay him. The restitution money from the savings. But no, you had to fight it on principle." "He's a con artist," Brenda screamed back. "I won't pay him." "Then we lose the house." Ted threw the letter on the ground. "Do you understand? The bank sent the notice of default. Foreclosure, Brenda. They're taking the house." I stepped back into the shadows of my garage. My heart was pounding. Foreclosure. It wasn't me taking the house. It was the bank. But I was the reason she couldn't save it. My lien was the anchor dragging them down. I called Saul immediately. "Saul, it's happening. The bank is foreclosing." "Excellent," Saul purred. "That means the property is going to auction." "What happens to my lien? If the bank forecloses, their mortgage is superior. They get paid first. Your lien might get wiped out in the foreclosure if there isn't enough surplus money. You might not get paid." My heart sank. So I did all this for nothing? Financially? Maybe, Saul said. But you said you wanted revenge, right? Yes. Well, the house goes to public auction. Anyone can bid, including you. I stopped. The gears in my head started turning. Saul, I said slowly, if you buy the house at the foreclosure auction, you own it, free and clear, and you become Brenda's landlord for the eviction process. A smile spread across my face. A wide, terrible smile. How much money do I need? Cash, Saul said. Auctions are cash on the barrelhead. Do you have access to funds? I thought about my savings. I thought about the inheritance from my grandfather I had been saving for a rainy day. I thought about the settlement check from my insurance company that had already paid out for the car. I was suing Brenda to reimburse them, essentially. I have about $300,000 liquid, I said, if I liquidate my portfolio. That might be enough, Saul said. Distressed properties go cheap, but if you bid as Jack Reynolds, she'll know. She might trash the place. We need a shell company, I said. Way ahead of you, Saul said. What do you want to call it? I looked at the empty spot in my driveway where Lucille usually parked. I remembered the neon pink paint. Neon Justice Holdings, LLC. I love it, Saul said. I'll draft the articles of incorporation. The auction is usually the first Tuesday of the month on the courthouse steps. Get your cashier's checks ready, Jack. We're going shopping. The weeks leading up to the auction were excruciating. Brenda was in full denial mode. I could see it. She wasn't packing. She wasn't looking for apartments. She was watering her lawn. She was putting up seasonal decorations, a wreath made of dried corn for Thanksgiving. She truly believed that it wouldn't happen. She thought that because she was Brenda Holloway, bad things didn't happen to her. She probably thought Ted would fix it, or the bank would give them another extension, or the HOA bylaws would somehow prevent a foreclosure. I stayed quiet. I kept my head down. I drove my rental car, a soulless Toyota Camry that smelled like vanilla air freshener, and parked it in the garage so she wouldn't see me. The first Tuesday of December arrived. It was cold. A gray, biting wind whipped through downtown Austin. I didn't go to the courthouse. I couldn't risk being seen. Saul sent a proxy, a guy named Mike who bought distressed properties for a living. Mike was instructed to bid up to $320,000. I sat in my home office, phone on the desk, staring at it. 10:00 a.m. The auction started. 10:15 a.m. Silence. 10:30 a.m. My phone rang. Hello? Mr. Reynolds? It was Mike. Congratulations. Did we get it? We got it. The bidding was light. The bank opened at the loan balance, which was about $240,000. One flipper went to $250,000. I hit him with $260,000. He walked away. $260,000. I choked. The house is worth $450,000. Foreclosures are brutal, man, Mike laughed. You just stole this house. Neon Justice Holdings is officially the owner of 425 Maple Drive. I'm heading to the clerk to record the deed. I hung up the phone. I stood up. My knees were shaking. I walked to the window. Across the street, Brenda was outside. She was hanging Christmas lights. She was putting up a string of tasteful white LEDs on the bushes I now owned. She was hammering nails into my porch. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea that the man she had called a criminal, the man she had tried to bankrupt, the man whose car she had defiled, was now the owner of the roof over her head. I picked up my phone and called my contractor friend, Tony. Tony, I said, are you free tomorrow? For you, Jack? Always. What do you need? Engine hoist? No, I said. I need you to come do a renovation estimate. Renovation? You finally fixing up your kitchen? Not my kitchen, I said, watching Brenda struggle with a tangle of lights. My new rental property. It's right across the street. And Tony? Yeah? Bring the big truck, the loud one. The morning after the auction was crisp and bright. It was the kind of Texas winter day where the sky is a hard, brilliant blue and the air smells like dried grass and cedar. I woke up with a feeling I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't just relief. It was ownership. I drank my coffee, standing at the living room window, looking across the street at 425 Maple Drive. Brenda's house. My house. She was outside again. She was aggressively sweeping her porch, attacking invisible dust motes with a broom. She looked stressed, brittle. The for sale sign next door was gone. The new neighbors moved in, and the world was moving on without her. But she was still clinging to the illusion of control. It was time to shatter it. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the rumble of a diesel engine shook the window panes. Big Tony had arrived. Tony drives a Ford F-450 dually. It's lifted. It's black. It has exhaust pipes the size of sewer mains. It is the exact opposite of everything Brenda stands for. He pulled up to the curb in front of her house, my house, and let the engine idle for a solid 10 seconds before killing it. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked out to meet him. I was wearing my work boots and holding a clipboard. I wanted to look official. Tony hopped out of the truck. He's 6'4", bald as an egg, and has arms that are mostly tattoos. "Morning, boss," Tony boomed. His voice is naturally amplified. The man has no indoor volume. "Morning, Tony," I said, shaking his hand. "Thanks for coming on short notice." For the man who bought the enemy's castle, I wouldn't miss it. Tony looked up at the house. He grimaced. Beige, so much beige. It looks like a giant cardboard box. That's what I said, I nodded, tapping my clipboard. I'm thinking we need to change the aesthetic, shake up the neighborhood a bit. We talking modern farmhouse or industrial chic? I'm thinking post-apocalyptic neon, I said loudly. I was thinking we paint the brick a nice, vibrant chartreuse and maybe pave the front lawn. Just asphalt the whole thing. Turn it into a parking lot for the car club. Tony laughed, a deep belly roar. I know a guy who has leftover highway paint. We can strip the lines right down the middle of the yard. The front door of 425 Maple flew open. Brenda stormed out. She was wearing her bathrobe again, the combat uniform of the suburban tyrant. She had the broom in her hand like a weapon. "Excuse me!" she shrieked. "What do you think you are doing?" She marched down the steps, stopping at the edge of the walkway. She pointed the broom handle at Tony. "You move that truck immediately. Commercial vehicles are not allowed to park on the street for more than 2 hours. Section 5.3 of the bylaws." Tony looked at me. He grinned. He crossed his massive arms. "She talking to me, boss?" "I am talking to you!" Brenda yelled, turning, her fire on me. "Jack, I see you. I know you hired this ruffian to harass me. You are violating the restraining order. You are within 100 feet of my person." I didn't back up. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "Actually, Brenda," I said calmly, "I'm not harassing you. I'm conducting a site inspection." "Site inspection? For what? Your delusions?" She scoffed, shaking her head. "Get off my property. Both of you. Right now. Or I am calling the police. And this time, Jack, they'll revoke your bond. You'll go to jail." "Call them," I said. She paused. She blinked. She clearly hadn't expected that. "What?" "Call the police, Brenda. In fact, I'll wait." She narrowed her eyes. "You think I won't? You think I'm bluffing? I think you're confused about whose property this is." "It's my house!" she screamed, stamping her foot. "My name is on the deed. I have lived here for 20 years. "Not anymore." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the folded document Saul had given me yesterday. It was a copy of the trustee's deed upon sale. I walked up the driveway. I stopped right at the property line, the line she used to forbid me from crossing. I stepped over it. Brenda gasped. "You are trespassing! That's it! Ted, call 911! "Brenda, stop," I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. "Look at the paper." I held it out. She didn't take it. She just stared at it. "Read it," I said. "Sold at public auction to the highest bidder. Yesterday, 10:00 a.m. She snatched the paper from my hand. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon. I saw the moment her brain tried to reject the information. "Neon Justice Holdings, LLC?" she read aloud. She looked up, sneering. "Who is that? Some investment firm? You're lying. You don't own this." "I am the sole managing member of Neon Justice Holdings," I said. "I bought it, Brenda. I bought your debt. I bought your house. I own the roof, the walls, the beige siding, and those petunias you're standing on." "No," she whispered. The paper shook in her hands. "That's not... Ted said we had more time. The bank said..." "The bank foreclosed," I said. "And I was the only one who showed up with a check." Tony stepped forward, playing his part perfectly. "So, boss, about that front door. I say we rip it out. Put in a steel roll-up door. Make it look like a loading dock." "I like that," I said. "Industrial." Brenda looked between us. The broom fell from her hand. It clattered on the concrete. "You can't do this," she said. Her voice wasn't a scream anymore. It was a thin, fragile thing. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said. "But you can't stay here." I pulled a second envelope from my clipboard. "This is a notice to vacate," I said, handing it to her. "In Texas, after a foreclosure, you are technically a tenant at sufferance. I'm giving you 3 days. 3 days to pack your things and get out. If you're not gone by Friday at noon, I file a forcible detainer suit. That's the fancy legal term for eviction." 3 days, she choked. But Christmas is in 2 weeks. I know, I said. Maybe you can ask Santa for a new place to live. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel. But then I looked across the street at my empty driveway, at the oil stain where Lucille used to sit, and I remembered the pink paint. I remembered the smirk on her face when she thought she had won. You destroyed my car, Brenda, I said softly. You tried to ruin me. You wanted a war? You got one. You just lost. She stared at me. Tears started to well up in her eyes. Big, fat, angry tears. She turned around and ran into the house. The door slammed so hard I felt the vibration in my feet. Tony let out a low whistle. That was cold, Jack, he said. Ice cold. She used enamel paint, Tony, I said, turning back to the street. She earned this. The next 3 days were a blur of activity at 425 Maple Drive. A moving truck appeared the next morning. Not a professional crew. Brenda couldn't afford that anymore. It was a U-Haul, driven by Ted. I watched from my window. It was like watching an ant colony collapse. Ted was doing most of the work, lugging boxes of books and clothes down the driveway. Brenda would occasionally come out carrying something small and precious, a vase, a framed certificate, and glare at my house. The neighborhood watched, too. Mr. Henderson set up a lawn chair. I'm not kidding. He sat in his driveway with a cooler, waving at Ted every time he walked by. Mrs. Gable brought me a casserole. I heard you bought it, Mrs. Gable whispered, handing me a dish of tuna helper. Is it true? Are you going to pave the lawn? No, I laughed. I was just scaring her. I'm going to rent it out. To nice people. Oh, thank God, she said. She fined me for my wind chimes last month. Said they were sonically intrusive. By Friday morning, the house was mostly empty. The U-Haul was full, Brenda's. Seddon was packed to the roof with pillows and blankets. I had one more errand to run before the final handover. I took an Uber to Exotic Auto Spa. Rico had called me the day before. She's ready, Jack. When I walked into the shop, my breath hitched. Lucille was sitting in the center of the bay, under the high-intensity inspection lights. She wasn't just restored. She was ascended. The paint was deeper, darker, more liquid than before. The pearl flake caught the light like crushed sapphires. The chrome, all new vintage stock, gleamed like jewelry. She looked dangerous. She looked expensive. She looked perfect. Rico, I said, running a hand over the quarter panel. You're a wizard. We did 5 coats of clear, Rico said, wiping his hands on a rag. Wet sanded to 5,000 grit. You can read a newspaper in the reflection of that door. It's better than new. Bill is settled, Rico said. Your lawyer sent the check from the escrow account or whatever. You good to roll? I'm good to roll. I slid into the driver's seat. The smell of fresh leather and high-octane fuel hit me. I turned the key. Vroom, rumble, rumble, rumble. The 327 big block woke up with a snarl. It was the sound of American freedom. Thanks, Rico, I yelled over the engine. Don't park it in the driveway, Rico warned. Oh, I'm parking it in the driveway, I said. Just for today. I drove home. The drive was a victory lap. I rolled the windows down. I wanted to hear the engine. I wanted everyone to see her. I turned onto Maple Drive at 11:45 a.m. The timing was cinematic. The U-Haul was idling in the street. Ted was in the driver's seat. Brenda was standing on the sidewalk, taking one last look at her kingdom. She looked small. Defeated. I rumbled down the street. The sound of my engine echoed off the houses. Brenda looked up. She saw the car. She saw the midnight blue paint, flawless and gleaming in the sun. She saw the chrome. She saw me behind the wheel, wearing sunglasses and a grin that threatened to split my face. I pulled into my driveway. I didn't pull into the garage. I parked right in the center of the concrete pad, exactly where she had vandalized it. I killed the engine. The silence returned to the street. I got out. I closed the door with a solid, heavy thunk. I leaned against the fender, crossed my arms, and looked across the street. Brenda was staring. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked from the pristine car to the "for sale" sign I had just stuck in her yard. A little premature, but I wanted the visual. She started to walk toward me. Old habits die hard. She probably wanted to yell about the noise. She probably wanted to tell me I couldn't park there. But she stopped at the curb. She remembered. She didn't own the street anymore. She didn't own the house behind her. She was a guest. A trespasser. She looked at me. I looked at her. "Nice color, isn't it?" I called out. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. The magnitude of her loss finally hit her. She had lost her money, her reputation, her home, and her battle. And the car, the symbol of everything she hated, was still there, shinier than ever. She turned around, her shoulders slumped. She walked to the U-Haul, climbed into the passenger seat, and slammed the door. Ted put the truck in gear. They drove away slowly, the heavy truck lumbering down the street, disappearing around the corner. I stood there for a long time. Mr. Henderson came out. He walked over, holding a beer. He looked at the empty house across the street. "So," Henderson said, "she's really gone?" "She's really gone," I said. "And you own it?" "I do." "What are you going to do with it?" I looked at the beige fortress. It looked lonely now. "I think I'll rent it," I said. "Maybe to a family with teenagers who play the drums. Or maybe a guy who restores motorcycles." Henderson laughed. He raised his beer. "To the king of the neighborhood." "No," I said, patting the roof of the Impala. "To Lucille." I spent the rest of the afternoon on the porch, watching the sun go down. The light hit the car, turning it into a glowing jewel. The street was quiet. No one was measuring grass. No one was checking for oil stains. It was just peaceful. And the best part? When the sun finally set and the street lights flickered on, I swear the Impala winked at me. Or maybe it was just a reflection. But I knew one thing for sure. Nobody was ever going to tell me to move it again.